Yamam Asmaracharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Parameshwara. Good. Be seated, please. Parameshwara. Good. Good. We're recording. You hit record. Okay. More computer problems. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Good. Welcome back. Last week we began our study of the Uddhava Gita, and we started to see this wonderful dialogue between Sri Krishna and his beloved friend, devotee, cousin, Uddhava. And we'll pick up the thread in just a moment. You remember that the dialogue within a dialogue, like in the Mahabharata. So the dialogue between Uddhava and Sri Krishna is being narrated by Shuka, the son of Vyasa, being narrated to King Parikshit. In fact, the whole of the Bhagavata Purana, remember the Uddhava Gita, is a small excerpt of that Bhagavata Purana, and the whole of the Purana is narrated by Shuka to Parikshit. Last week I mentioned that King Parikshit was cursed to die in 7 days, and that's the context of the Bhagavata Purana. I said in a class that he was cursed by a snake, and someone very nicely sent an email that in the Bhagavata Purana, there's a different story. By the way, I'm not an expert in Puranas. I'm trained in Advaita Vedanta. So there are many, countless stories in the Puranas that I don't know or have some misinformation. So he reminded, of course I knew this story, but it didn't come to my mind in last week's class, where Parikshit was hunting deer. He came across a rishi. He asked the rishi, "Did you see where the deer went?" The rishi was meditating. Parikshit was a good man, but he was in a bad mood that day. Are you ever in a bad mood? You know how that works. So being in a bad mood, he grabbed the snake and put it around the rishi's neck to disrespect him. Anyway, the rishi was a rishi. He doesn't care. Put more snakes on him. You look at it as bhushana, as a decoration for him. But his son didn't like it at all. His son got upset, and it was his son who cursed the king Parikshit to die within 7 days. That's the story from the Bhagavata Purana. But there's another story from the Mahabharata, where in the earlier parts of the Mahabharata, the Pandavas took with them an army and went to Nagaloka, the realm of the serpents, and fought a big battle with all those serpents. I'm not sure about the details leading up to that war. Anyway, it was a pretty bloody war, and Arjuna, in the end, destroyed Nagaloka. And so somehow the king of the Nagas, Takshaka was his name, the king of the Nagas survived, and he cursed Arjuna's family. He said, "Your lineage will die off. It will not be continued." So this is a curse on Arjuna's lineage. And Arjuna's son was Abhimanyu. Abhimanyu's son was King Parikshit. So there are two ways of understanding the curse. Bhagavata Purana says it was the son of the sage, and Mahabharata said it was Takshaka's curse on Arjuna's lineage. Which is right? Remember our discussion about how these texts are not history books? Is this perhaps more evidence that they're not history books when they tell stories different? And that's just a fact. Different Puranas and different epics will tell the same stories, but they're not congruent. They don't fit together necessarily. So it's more evidence that these great scriptures are powerful scriptures for teaching us, but it's not helpful to look at them as we look at modern history books. They're not modern history books. And please? Yeah? Thank you. Okay. Another comment came. So at the end of the class, remember, I was talking about Mahabharata and said you cannot look at it as a history book because of it records vimanas flying through the air and arrows acting like atomic bombs and all of that. So another question came, did Swamiji say that Mahabharata is a story and not history? Which I didn't say. I did say, I'll own this statement. I did say that it is a story and not history, but it is a story based on a historical event. Does it make sense? There was a historical war upon which the story of the Mahabharata is based. Have you watched these, what are they called, docudramas on TV, where they take a historical event and then they dramatize it with actors? And in that dramatization, they always add some juicy stuff because otherwise it'll be like a boring documentary. That's why they call it docudrama. So there's a long history of adding stuff to stories to make the stories more compelling. So that is certainly true of the Mahabharata. It is a story based on an actual historic event. The Mahabharata is not a history book. Okay, let's come back to our Bhagavata Purana. So before, we're starting with chapter 2, and before in chapter 1, which we're choosing not to study, we're studying selected chapters because it's quite lengthy. In chapter 1, Uddhava approaches Krishna. They're in Dwaraka, and a terrible war is about to break out in Dwaraka. And Uddhava says, "Oh Krishna, you should get out of here before the war begins." And Sri Krishna then responds. That's where chapter 2 begins. Sri Krishna says, "Yes, I'm planning to leave, not just because of the war, but because," and Sri Krishna didn't explain it, but because his work as an avatar, actually he did explain, his work as an avatara is coming to an end. And the Kali Yuga is about to begin. Remember, the Kali Yuga, the beginning point of the Kali Yuga is defined as the end of Sri Krishna's life. So Sri Krishna now is responding to Uddhava, And we'll pick up the thread with verse 5. Navastavyam tvayaiveha, navastavyam tvayaiveha, maya tyakte mahitale, maya tyakte mahitale, jano dharma ruchir bhadra, jano dharma ruchir bhadra, bhavishyati kalau yuge, bhavishyati kalau yuge. In the second line, maya tyakte mahitale. When I leave the mahitale, literally the surface of the earth, when I leave this earthly realm, tyakte, when I leave this earthly realm, which is soon, and he tells Uddhava, in the end, breaking up the words, tvaya eva iha. Tvaya, you too, na vastavyam iha. You too should not stay here. Uddhava has just told Krishna, get out of here before the war. And Sri Krishna then responds to Uddhava, yes, you too should not stay here. Why? In the third line, at the end of the line, he addresses his dear friend Uddhava. He says, Bhadra, O blessed one, janaha adharma ruchihi bhavishyati. Kalau yuge. Start at the end. Kalau yuge. In the Kali Yuga, which is about to begin when Krishna leaves this earthly realm and returns to Vaikuntha Loka as Lord Vishnu, he says, in this Kali Yuga, janaha bhavishyati, people will become adharma ruchihi, inclined towards adharma. In the Kali Yuga, people will become inclined towards dharma. And we discussed at some length in the last class how the Puranic vision of the Kali Yuga is pretty grim. And I said that we need not take that as a history book, because I think our current society is not pretty grim. It's actually historically better than any other period in time. On the other hand, Sri Krishna is making a good point here. Adharma ruchihi. People are becoming more inclined towards adharma in the Kali Yuga, and today. You can't deny it. You cannot deny the fact that people feel more free to go against dharma today, publicly and privately. I don't think it can be argued. People are behaving in increasingly adharmic ways. We certainly see that in the divisiveness in this country and around the world when you got two sides fighting with each other. Even if one side tries to be dharmic, when they're engaged in this divisive fighting, those who are dharmic become adharmic. Absolutely. We're seeing an increase of adharmic behavior in this modern times. Now, there's an interesting parallel, or not parallel, comparison to the Bhagavad Gita in the context of the Mahabharata. The Bhagavad Gita, as you remember, takes place on the first day of the war. And so we can say that the Uddhava Gita takes place at just before the Kali Yuga. So there's significance to the timing. Because the Bhagavad Gita is taught just before a terrible war, one perspective, not the only perspective, but one perspective we can take is that the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita are teachings for a time of war. And that's not the only way of looking at it, but it is a valid way of understanding the context of the Bhagavad Gita, spiritual teachings for a time of war. Now, with that in mind, let's look at the Uddhava Gita. Sri Krishna has just said, with the coming Kali Yuga, there will be an increase in adharma. So we could make a similar comment about the Uddhava Gita and say, just as the Bhagavad Gita is Sri Krishna's spiritual teachings for a time of war. By the way, war means not just the war of the Mahabharata. War means the war that goes on in our minds and hearts, the war that goes on in the world around us, and in sometimes families themselves are at war with each other, like the Pandavas and Kauravas were at war with each other. Anyway, the battle is not confined to that battlefield. So war in general, conflict in general. So if we rephrase it then, the Bhagavad Gita are spiritual teachings given by Sri Krishna for dealing with conflict, battle. Here, we have the teachings here in the Uddhava Gita, we have the teachings of Sri Krishna in a different context, in the context of dealing with adharma. How to, let's put it in these terms, how Uddhava is going to leave Dwaraka. But remember, he wanted to go with Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna is going to heaven, so to speak, so he would have to die to accompany Sri Krishna, which means Uddhava will leave Dwaraka, but he won't be able to leave the Kali Yuga. He's still stuck on this planet during the Kali Yuga, which means Uddhava is going to have to live in an increasingly adharmic society, just as we have to live in an increasingly adharmic society. So we can then say that the Uddhava Gita is Sri Krishna's instructions to Uddhava and to all of us about how to live in an increasingly adharmic society. So I think that observation makes our study incredibly relevant because of the terrible increase of adharma we see everywhere. So I mentioned last week the interesting comment. I mentioned last week the fight going on in Israel now with the Palestinians. And I got a comment on that. It says, Swamiji, please don't forget about us who live in Ukraine. Wow. So obviously, Israel is not the only place where war is occurring now. It's perhaps the most recent war, but in Ukraine, it's almost 2 years now they've been going on, and tens of thousands of people have died. Just a terrible, terrible war. And as war increases, so we're seeing an increasing occurrence of war, which is definitely an increasing occurrence of adharma. Just to relate to last week's topic, though, because I made a very strong point that, in my opinion, it would be incorrect to conclude that this is a Kali Yuga and our society is headed for absolute disaster. There are many people who say that. I feel it's absolutely wrong, because scholars have proven the fact that our lives today are better than at any other point in history, on the average. So the average person living on this planet in 2023 is better off than people on the average living at any other time in history. So I think this accusation, this Kali Yuga, this world is coming to an end soon, I would reject that kind of statement entirely. But That doesn't negate what we've just discussed. This may be the best of times, but it's equally true that adharma is increasing. Both can be true, right? We are materially comfortable. We are healthier, better fed, more materially comfortable than any other time in history, but it is also true that adharma is on the increase. Of course, what goes up eventually comes down, but right now it's going up. So let's come back to our text now. These are teachings meant to help us cope with an increasingly adharmic society in which we live. So these are very relevant teachings for us. And then Sri Krishna continues. There we go. Tvam tu sarvam parityajya, tvam tu sarvam parityajya, sneham swajana bandhushu, sneham swajana bandhushu, maya veshamana samyaka, maya veshamana samyaka, samadrik vicharaswagam, samadrik vicharaswagam. Tvam tu. So now comes the instructions. In fact, the spiritual instructions of the Uddhava Gita begin with this verse. Chapter 2, verse 6. Remember in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 11. is where Sri Krishna's Upadesha, his teachings begin in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 11. Here, chapter 2, verse 6, where he begins his spiritual instructions to Uddhava in terms of how Uddhava should manage his ongoing life. After Sri Krishna lives, how should Uddhava live in an increasingly adharmic world? He says to Uddhava, Tvam, you, Tvam tu, you, in particular, Uddhava, sarvam, connected to the second line, sneham, all attachment, sarvam sneham, all attachment, parityajya, giving up all attachment. What kind of attachment? Attachment, swajana bandhushu, attachment to the people in your own family. So basically all the people in Dwaraka, they're all related. As we joked last week, everyone seems to be related to someone. So all the people of Dwaraka, the Vrishnis who are about to enter into war and kill each other off, actually destroy their own culture. We discussed last week that's about to take place. And here, Sri Krishna begins by saying, O Uddhava, you should give up your attachment to these people, to your own family members. Now, at first, that seems pretty harsh. Give up attachment to your family. Turn your back and walk away from your family. Actually, he's saying, don't walk away from your family. Did he say to give up your family? He said, give up sneha. Not give up your family. Give up attachment. Sneha. Sneha is an interesting word in Sanskrit because like words can have multiple meanings. So sneha, usually I think in Hindi would usually mean like affection, I think would be a common translation. And certainly it has that same meaning also in Sanskrit. Obviously the Sanskrit word sneha came before the Hindi word sneh. But in Sanskrit, the word sneha, which can mean affection or love, it's derived from a verbal root meaning to stick. That's interesting. So in Sanskrit, when you say Tvam snehyami, I love you. You can also translate it as, I stick to you. It has both meanings. I love you, I stick to you. That sticky, clingy love is attachment. What does that mean, clingy love? And we've had this discussion extensively, but let me just remind you that attachment or clingy love is emotional dependence. That's what it is. Call it for what it is. Attachment means emotional dependence. When your emotional well-being depends on the other person, that's emotional dependence. And emotional dependence is not love. You know that. So love means loving the person as they are, as opposed to this emotional dependence. I have to use this example. I'm sorry. It's a little bit of a rough example, but it's appropriate. Over the years, I have met with quite a few families who have come to me for advice when one of the children says they are gay, and the parents have a hard time with that, which is not, I understand why. But here's the point. Parents love their children, absolutely true. But most parents also are emotionally dependent on their children. So for the emotional dependence means the emotional well-being of the parents depends on something in the children. And what happens, of course, in these families is the parents say, we cannot be emotionally okay if our son or daughter is gay. That's not love. In fact, that's putting a condition on love. When the parents say, we can emotionally accept our children only if they are not gay. That's not love. That's putting love in a box, saying, trying to put your children in a box, not your children. But you get the point. When the parents' emotional well-being depends on their children being straight, marrying the right person, having the right job, living in the right place, all of these things. Parents put these conditions on their children. How is that love? I thought love is unconditional acceptance. It is. Love is unconditional acceptance. Sneha refers to that clinging love where there is attachment, where there is emotional dependence. That is not love. So notice here, Sri Krishna tells Uddhava not to abandon his family, but to abandon this attachment. Meaning, you can be with a family. There's a nice term that's used here. They call it healthy detachment, as opposed to unhealthy detachment. Unhealthy detachment means Uddhava walks away from his family and says, who cares about you? That's unhealthy detachment. Unhealthy detachment is, this happens in India, not here, but in India, when a child comes out as being gay, some of those children are thrown out of the household. I don't think that would happen here. It happens regularly in India. So, that is unhealthy detachment. What is healthy detachment? Well, how about getting rid of that emotional dependence? If emotional dependence is attachment, then healthy detachment means just not getting rid of the kid, but getting rid of the emotional dependence. So, healthy detachment means not liking the fact that your children are not straight, because you can't change how you feel. You like something, you don't like something. We don't have a switch where we can decide, okay, I'm going to like it now, I'm going to, that doesn't work. But what does work is this healthy detachment where you decouple your emotional well-being from that person. Meaning, you recognize that your son or daughter has their own prarabdha karma, their own life to live, and you have your own life to live, and you have to live your life your way, they have to live their life their way. You can be happy with your life, they can be happy with your life. You both mutually be happy without depending on each other. That clinging love, attachment. You hold on to each other. The image that comes in my mind, this, when, by the way, not this child and parent doesn't apply here, but sometimes there are unhealthy relationships in which he depends on her emotionally, she depends on him emotionally. They're both deeply attached to each other, clinging to each other, desperately clinging to each other. The image I have in my mind are two people in the ocean who can't swim, who cling to each other out of desperation. Doesn't help. Anyway, enough said. This sneha then refers to this clinging attachment. So Sri Krishna's spiritual instruction to Uddhava is give up your clinging attachment, gain this healthy detachment. But that's only part one. So part one is dealing with emotions. Another significant parallel. Interesting. You might remember me saying that Sri Krishna's response to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita is primarily meant to address Arjuna's emotional meltdown, right? That's the context. So I've described the Bhagavad Gita then as spiritual teachings in the context of addressing an emotional problem. Do you think Uddhava might have an emotional problem here? Seeing his family about to self-destruct? That's very similar. Arjuna, I won't say very similar to Arjuna's situation. Arjuna faces the death of his family as a result of war. Uddhava, actually there is that similarity. Different kinds of war. The background to the war is very different. But Dwaraka, the family members are going to start fighting with each other. War, we'll call it civil war. Civil war is about to break out in Dwaraka. Do you think that would affect Uddhava emotionally? Yes. So here we see a parallel, again, spiritual teachings in the context of handling emotional problems, which sets Sri Krishna's teachings, both in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Uddhava Gita, sets the teachings apart from texts like the Upanishads, from texts like the work of Shankaracharya and all the great teachers of Advaita Vedanta. Those texts do not primarily address emotional issues. These two Gitas certainly do, which is why we study them on our Saturday morning classes. So dealing with emotions is part of the problem, but there's also a spiritual dimension to the situation, to the problem, which Sri Krishna then addresses. Goes on in the second half to tell Uddhava, Mayi Aveshya. You have to break the words apart. Mana samyaka, aveshya manaha. Merge your mind, place your mind. Merge is not right. Aveshya. Place your mind, mayi, on me, in me, samyak, perfectly, completely, correctly. Focus your attention on me. And here Sri Krishna is not speaking as Uddhava's friend or cousin. Sri Krishna is speaking as Ishvara. So focus your attention on Ishvara and samyak, samadrik, vicharasva mam. You should be samadrik, having an equal vision, having equanimity. Equanimity is the result of giving up this emotional dependence. As long as you have emotional dependence, you certainly don't have equanimity. If there are two children, one is gay and the other is straight, if the parents have this clinging attachment, will they be equal, those children? Problem, huge problem. So giving up this emotional dependence, giving up attachment, giving up this sneha in the Sanskrit meaning of sticky love, giving that up, the result of giving up that attachment, the result is equanimity. Equanimity means you are who you are. And with regard to those who are gay, please don't think that they became gay. There's so much science to show that this is hardwired into people's brains, and it's not a matter of choice, nor are they conditioned in some way. There's too much science behind this. So please don't doubt that science. It's quite correct. So people are born the way they are. So therefore, equanimity means to accept people the way they are. Do you want to be accepted the way you are? How about somebody finds and of course this happens, somebody finds something about you that they don't like, and it's a family member, and they say, I don't like this about you. You have to change. Why? They don't like that. Why don't they like that? Attachment, emotional dependence. So they want you to change. How do you feel? That feels terrible, right? Because you know you can't change. This is the way you are. What you see is what you get. And that's true for us all. We all have our, nice English word, we all have our quirks, right? You have, I have, everyone has. We all have our quirks. Do you want to be judged on your quirks? Rejected based on your quirks? No, we all want to be accepted exactly as we are. That's the equanimity Sri Krishna speaks about here, samadrik. Samadrik, with equanimity, vicharasvagam, go and wander the world. Instead of wander, I would say live your life. Is not saying to live as a sannyasi. That's not what's being said here. But live your life, vicharasva. Go and move about. Live your life, gam. Gam means earth. Go and live on this earth with equanimity. Again, how to live in an increasingly adharmic world with equanimity. Meaning, this is we talked about tribes last week. meaning equanimity towards the tribe you like and the tribe you don't like. I'm referring to Democrats and Republicans. You may like one and dislike the other. That's part of the problem of divisiveness, is it not? If you consider, I am a fervid Republican, I am a fervid Democrat, you're becoming part of the problem. And if you say, but look how bad they're behaving, does that give you license to behave badly? That's a really stupid argument, is it not? They're behaving like that, therefore we have to behave like this. Isn't that's the classic example of two-year-old boys in a sandbox with these plastic shovels. One boy hits the first boy, that boy hits the other boy, and they go on hitting each other over and over again, duplicating each other's behavior. Don't be part of the problem. We need not be part of the problem. Equanimity means, and allow me just to be, we're talking about a dharmic society. What we see going on in Washington today is ridiculous. And I think most people would agree. In fact, surprisingly, even Republicans agree that what's happening in Washington today, in fact, definitely, everyone agrees what's going on in Washington today is ridiculous. So, the problem is this: blame. It's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault. The moment it's your fault, you are excused of responsibility. It's all of our fault. We elected those people in Washington. So we as an American culture, and I know not all of you vote, but those of you who can vote, you put those people in Washington. So aren't we all to blame? And aren't politicians a reflection of us as a people? There's a little problem here, and that is sometimes politicians reflect our best natures, and sometimes politicians reflect our lowest natures. We have both. You know, it's there's a famous book where the author writes about our higher angels. You know, the Christian idea, you got the angel sitting on one shoulder and the devil sitting on the other. And that's meant to characterize all people, even good people. Even good people have the devil sitting on one shoulder. So what they say is you should only talk to the angel. Don't ignore the devil. This is kind of like Christian thought. But we all have the tendency to occasionally converse with the so-called devil. And when that behavior is then emulated by our political leaders, we then see this mess in Washington, and the point I'm making is simply that we all bear responsibility. And this is the basis for equanimity. In fact, my guru made such a big deal out of the word objectivity. He said, you'd be surprised, he said, an enlightened person is a perfectly objective person. And what he meant by that is usually our thinking is tainted or colored by our emotions, by our raga dvesha, what we like and what we don't like. All of that, our thinking is always biased, colored, affected, tainted. And when he said that an enlightened person is an objective person, he meant someone whose thinking is completely unaffected, completely undistorted by raga, dvesha, by likes and dislikes, by all these political leanings. So someone whose mind is perfectly objective, Puja Swamiji was talking about an enlightened person. Here, instead of objective, Sri Krishna uses the word equanimity. I think they both have the same intent here. Okay, how did I even get stuck on a prior verse? Where am I? Verse 6. Oh. Oh, Vicharaswagam. So, sorry, I got off on. I won't call it a tangent because here we are relating these teachings to our daily life. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? And isn't most people complain that spiritual life is unrealistic because it doesn't address problems of the world and problems of life. What have we been talking about for the last half hour? How is that irrelevant? It's all right here in Uddhava Gita. Okay, let's continue. Yadidam manasavacha, yadidam manasavacha, chakshub. There's a typo here. Oh no, chakshurbhyam. Yeah, correct. Chakshurbhyam shravanadibihi, chakshurbhyam shravanadibihi, nashwaram grihyamanam cha, nashwaram grihyamanam cha, vidhi maya manomayam, vidhi maya manomayam. So here Sri Krishna begins to tell Uddhava how to develop detachment. Notice there's a big problem when spiritual teachers tell you what to do and don't tell you how. They say you should practice karma yoga. They don't tell you how. They say you should give up attachment. They don't tell you how. They say you should forgive those who have hurt you. They don't tell you how. Sri Krishna says how. He's just told Uddhava, give up attachment. How? Yet, he says, yadidam, and you have to connect that in the third line. Yadidam grihyamanam. Whatever is grasped, in a sense of perceived, whatever you perceive with, in the second line, chakshurbhyam, with your two eyes, whatever you perceive, shravanadibihi, with your ears and your other organs of sense, whatever you perceive, manasa, with your mind, and also vacha. Here, perceive, we can't use the word perceive in a very narrow way, but who's talking about all of your engagement with the world is by means of your senses and mind. How do we interact with the world? Right? Our five senses and our mind. And he includes vacha very importantly because we interact a lot with the world through what we say. And what we say includes what we write, the emails and texts you write. So all of it counts. All of it counts, which I don't understand. Sorry, this is a tangent. All of this counts. So the tangent is, then why do some people in emails and texts behave in such obnoxious manners? You meet them face to face, they'll be very polite. But in an email, watch out. Sorry, I don't get that, and that is a tangent. We'll come back now. So Sri Krishna says, whatever grihyamanam, whatever engagement, I'm retranslating this, whatever is the engagement of your mind, of your speech, of your words, the engagement of your five senses, whatever engagement you have, what involvement is even a better word. whatever involvement you have with the world, Sri Krishna says, all of that is nashwaram. That's the key word here. Nashwaram. It's all transient. It's all going away. It's all impermanent. Our Buddhist friends like that word a lot. It's all, and it's correct. It's all impermanent. Now, what is our context? Addressing the problem of attachment. And the problem of attachment comes because you think someone or something is essential for your emotional well-being, and it's a wrong assumption. Whatever you cling on to, can you hold on to it forever? This is tough words when we apply it, especially to loved ones, to family members, etc. So you hold on to a family member, emotional dependence. Won't that family member die one day? Yeah. So by, what is the American expression? You put all your eggs in one basket. You make that person the focal point of your life, and you cling desperately to that person. It's a formula for misery, right? That's what Sri Krishna is saying here. It's what do you call this? Tough love is his approach right now. It's not easy to hear, because he's saying that whatever you depend on for your emotional well-being, it's guaranteed to go away. Everything you depend on out there in the world to be okay, it can be taken away from you in an instant. Your car can be stolen, your house can be burnt down, loved ones can die, you can lose your job. All the things that we consider important in life, including our own health, any of that can be robbed from us in an instant. And here's the problem. Our emotional well-being depends on all of that. There's some attachment to all of that. This is why we suffer, because we are emotionally dependent on all of that. And the way Vedanta addresses this problem of suffering is by helping you discover within yourself that true nature of your true self, that consciousness, which is your essential nature, that consciousness which truly remains utterly unaffected when things are robbed away from you. This has to be discovered. This is not a matter of belief. Faith won't work here. You have to personally discover this Vedantic truth. The truth that, you've heard me say this before, the truth that you are okay no matter what, in very simple terms. This has to be discovered. And absolutely, these teachings are capable of leading you to discover that even when your house burns down, your car is stolen, you lose, suppose all of that happened. Your car is stolen in 1 week. Your car, just for fun, imagine a week where your car is stolen, your house burns down, you lose a family member, you lose your job, and you have a non-fatal heart attack. How's that for a good week? Some people say, oh, I had a really bad week. Not like this one. Can you imagine being okay? It's possible. It's absolutely possible. Remember the story of King Janaka being told, oh, your kingdom is burning down. Hey, who cares? He was an enlightened king. If King Janaka can be okay when his kingdom is burning down, you can be okay when you encounter these losses in life. That's the purpose of these teachings. How to let go of all that. It says in the last line, Vidhi, how would you say in Hindi? Sanjo. O Uddhava, understand this, that all of this attachment is maya manomayam. It is all maya. It is all tricky. You can't translate it as illusion. It's not real. It is manomayam. It is all created by your mind. Manomayam. It is a kind of maya that is created by your mind. A kind of maya created by your mind would be like a dream. A dream is a maya created by your mind. In the same way, emotional dependence is a maya created by your mind. You believe yourself to be emotionally dependent. Let's go back to that bad week. Suppose your house burnt down. For two days, you'd be really, really upset. But if you're a mature person, you've got insurance and you're alive, and okay, what do they say? You just get on with your life. You go on with your life and you manage. I'm just giving that as an illustration to suggest that it is possible to suffer losses in life without so much regret and suffering. It's possible. Okay. We'll come back to this point. We're a little distracted right now. We'll come back to this very point in our next class, and we'll continue with our study of the Uddhava Gita. Some announcements. Tomorrow, Sunday, we have our Upadesha Sahasri class, a very wonderful class on Vedanta at 10 o'clock. Come and join us at 11 o'clock immediately after. We have satsang. Also, we have this Samashraya support group. It's a support group for caregivers, in particular those caring for others with mental illness. So if you have a family member with mental illness, then this support group might be very helpful for you. It meets tomorrow here at 4 o'clock. Okay, and with that, we'll conclude our class with our brief prayers. Perfect. Om Gananaham Tva Ganapatigam Avamahe Kaving Gavidam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatahana Shranvan Utabasira Saranam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Bhavet, Asato Ma Sadgamaya, Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. Very good.